I'm Pat Leisman, co-founder of the Highland Friendship Club. Thanks for being here. This is our third series. The first series was describing the various types of housing arrangements. We had 5 different parents talk about, or caregivers talk about their arrangement. The second one was we had various housing providers talk about the services that they provided. So this series is about how do we pay for all of that. Jerry is a wealth of knowledge from Hennepin County, and thank you, Jerry, for being here. And I'm going to turn it right over to Jerry. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I'm happy to join. The Highland Friendship Club has a long history and has a huge positive reputation. I hear about them all the time and all the really good things you're doing. So thanks for being a part of that group. I'm a senior planning analyst, and as a senior planning analyst, some of the things I do are to work in housing on the creative side, like own home and individualized housing, as well as vocational services with county funded programs and other things like that, as well as consumer directed community support, consumer support grant. I also work with a lot of parents, and I'm one of the planners that doesn't have to do math very much. It's one of my really one of the best jobs. I get to work with families, I get to work with people and tell them about county services, which is really great. I've met so many people over the years I've been at the county. When I talk to them about housing, there's 3 questions I ask them. I say, where do you want to live? And I don't just mean it with my fingers crossed or my arms crossed, you know, I really mean, where do you want to live? Where in your heart do you want to go? How will you pay for rent and food? And how will you pay for the staff support necessary? They'll give me some information back, and then I'll tell them what we have at the county to kind of make the picture work more completely. Tonight, when we talk about funding streams, we're going to really talk about that question, how will I afford rent and food? Waivered services and PCA services can provide the staff supports, and some waivered services and PCA services can help us get to paying for food as a waivered service. But we're really going to talk a lot about how do I pay for rent and food. And so first, a little commercial message. We offer at Hennepin County community training, community informational sessions. This is a big part of my job. You don't have to be a Hennepin County resident. You can be anywhere in Minnesota because the information is the same. And so these are some of the topics we offer. Consumer support grant, waiver overview, Employment First Minnesota, guardianship supported decision-making, long-term care waivered services, person-centered planning funding. I'm a certified person-centered thinking planner, so I've trained hundreds of staff in that area. Vocational supports and the ever popular waiver reimagined. We have some questions about that, I think, too. These questions or these trainings are free right now. They're on YouTube videos. There's a website listed on the screen. You can just go to that and then either email us or call, and we will send you the link to the video, and hopefully you'll get some good information. So housing, we'll start from the start. Typical housing for you and I, or people that just want housing. There's market rate housing. A couple of years ago, we did a demonstration on home ownership. So we helped 10 people to buy their own house, and all of those 10 people are still in their house, which is really, really great. Some programs have first-time home buyer money. Plymouth has a really good program on first-time home buyer money. Minnesota Housing Finance Agency also has a really good program on first-time home buyer. There's also land trusts, City of Lake Land Trust, Northwest Regional Land Trust, and they buy the portion of the plot of land or a portion of the mortgage. You get to live in the whole house, but it's more affordable. And when you sell your house, you sell it to a person that is a similar financial situation that you did. And their goal is to perpetuate affordable housing in the community. So we have lots of things. We could have a 2-hour training just on home ownership, so that information is available. And then rental housing, we all have heard and experienced probably that rent is going up. It's some of the articles you read that it's higher than it's ever been, and it's less affordable than buying a house. And so sharing housing or things like that, having a housemate or a roommate that you get along with, hopefully, are things that are really, really helpful. So we have site-based housing subsidies, and these have sometimes long waiting lists, but I have worked with people that actually got public housing, and they're living in a great apartment in an apartment building, and they're paying $200 a month for rent, and the program is paying the difference. And so it does happen. There's a website called Housing Link, I believe it is. And you can actually find out if there's an opening in a public housing waiting list, then you can go and apply for that. And then it's based on kind of the weight that you have if you have a disability and your need. So some public housing is scattered site. There's project-based Section 8. There's Section 811, which is for people with disabilities. And there's Section 202 for elderly folks. And the common thread within these is that residents pay 1/3 of their income for rent. So it's a really good deal. If you make $1,000, you pay $333. And it's not something just to say, I'm never going to get it. Apply, get on the waiting list, and see what happens. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it could happen over time.
Jerry, can I ask a question on that Section 8?
You can.
So Section 8 doesn't mean in a particular building. Could it be that, let's say I own a duplex and I have a vacancy. I can accept that Section 8 voucher?
There's two kinds of Section 8. One is site-based, which we just talked about, and then we're going to get to a voucher. And so the voucher can go anywhere. It can go to California, Florida, Minnesota. And it's offered if you live in Section 8 site-based housing. Usually if you've been there a few years, 2 or 3 years, they might offer that to you. And then it sounds like a really good deal, but you have to find a place to live within the income that you have and find an opening. If you don't, then you're kind of out of luck. So there's some risks with it as well. But it is mobile. Section 8 vouchers are mobile, and Section 8 site-based, you have to live in the building that has the certification for it. Okay, so site-based reduced rent housing, low income tax credit. I've been involved with the Department of Human Services, and they've said, hey, Jerry, we have 8 apartments along Lake Minnetonka on the South Shore that we need to find. They're 1-bedrooms. We need to find 8 people that want to live there. And so we had emails to all of our case managers. We prioritize the hardest to serve first, and we try to fill those up. And so those 8 people are living not too far from Lake Minnetonka. It's a process where they tour it, they apply, and they're paying, $200 a month for rent, which is really, really good. Some have to have income below a certain standard. So it's not just everybody. If I'm gainfully employed and I have a great income, I wouldn't maybe qualify because it has to be a percent of the area median income. So it wouldn't make sense for some people sometimes to pay 1/3 of their rent. That would be more income proportionate to what they could pay if they just paid market-based rent. There's the voucher. So if you live in Section 8 for a period of time, or if you're lucky enough to just get a voucher, it's funded by the federal government. The waiting lists are long. The voucher is portable, so residents can take it with them and they can move around the city to other places that accept the voucher, or even other states, because it's a federal program. There's one program called Bridges, and this is all information I can give you more information on. I'm just kind of going through it really quick, but I already sent a few resources ahead of time that can be sent out, and I can send additional resources out too. So the Bridges Rental Assistance Program is funded through the state of Minnesota. If people are leaving institutions like intermediate care facilities for people with developmental disabilities, or nursing homes, or mental health facilities, they can get a rental voucher and pay 30% of their income for rent.
Jerry, can I ask you this? With the Section 8 voucher, I happen to work for HUD, so I have a little more inside information than maybe
you should be
most,
giving this training.
No, heavens no. But let's just back up a little bit. So how does someone apply for a voucher? Does their social worker help them? Do they have to contact HUD? Do they contact
Typically, a city will have a housing department. Minneapolis has a housing department, downtown Minneapolis. New Hope, Minnetonka, have housing departments, and each of them have their own criteria and or waiting lists. And so if you go to a website, you can find out if there's an opening or not for their waiting list. You can apply. And then depending on the weight that you carry, because you have significant need, you might be weighted higher than another person. And you, like a person that I work with has a brain injury. I volunteered with him for 20 years already. He's doing really well. And he was living in competitive apartment. He didn't have very much money to spend because of all the rent. And he applied for Section 8 site-based in a very nice apartment. And he got it, which was amazing. He got this letter that said, you're 50th on the list. Now you're 20, now you're 12, now you're 1. And so we got it. And then 3 years later, he was offered a voucher. And so that's another way to get it. If you're in Section 8 living there, and sometimes that city, in his case, the city of Plymouth, said, okay, you want a voucher now. And so he could choose to keep it or not.
I have another question. I'm Rosemary Fagrilli, the other co-founder, and I think it's really important for our families to know they need to contact either the St. Paul Public Housing or St. Paul Housing Authority or Minneapolis Housing Authority, because those applications, those periods only open up for a short period of time each year. It's a very competitive process. But if I remember correctly, Jerry, I believe that each of them had priorities. They would have priority ranking for people with disabilities. Is that still the case?
That is true. That's why the gentleman I work with a brain injury had a priority, because he had challenging behavior and a brain injury. And so he was prioritized and actually got the letter that said, you're 50th on the list from 3,000. Now you're 12. It's like, oh my gosh, that's yeah, exactly. Let's print this letter and put it on the wall. And now you're
But
first.
it's really important though that we as families who are seeking housing for our family members know when those periods open, because they open up and they close, and then you've got to wait another year to get on that list.
Right. I think the website is housinglink.org. It's a part of this other part of the training. You can sign up, you can put your email address there, and they'll notify you when any housing agency has an opening in their waiting list and go apply. When you look at that, usually cities on the outer rings of Minneapolis and St. Paul, whatever they are, the Plymouths, the New Hopes, whatever, have a greater tendency to have openings than Minneapolis, because everybody moves in Minneapolis and St. Paul because of transportation and there's, services and whatever. But the outer rings tend to have a little bit more opening. It's still not open, but it's a little bit more healthy than the inner city is. Okay. So these are housing programs that help with rent. How am I going to pay for rent in my typical apartment in the community, or in my community residential setting, my group home that I'm going to live in, whatever I'm living in? And so one fund is called Housing Support. Most people know it as group residential housing, but the new name, which is like 5 years old now, new name, is Housing Support. And it's typically available from licensed settings or community residential services. Agencies that have a license, 245D license, they have mental health services, they're a board and care. And the difference is the money goes to that provider and they pay for the rent and they get food, and sometimes they get services, which is different than Minnesota Housing Aid and MSA Housing Assistance. We're going to talk about both of these separately. I'm going to talk about Housing Support first and MSA Housing Assistance second. MSA is nice because it goes to the person. It goes to their payee in a check if they have a payee, and it goes on their electronics benefits card if they have SNAP benefits or electronic benefits. And they can go to the bank and they can withdraw their benefit twice a month for free. It's just cash, and we're not keeping track of how they spend it. We like them to spend it on rent and food, but if they needed to fix a tire 1 month, they could spend it on a tire. And so those are two of the most common funding streams that we're going to talk about.
Hey, Jerry, there's a question.
Sure.
On whether or not you need to live in the city where you are applying through Housing Link.
You don't have to live in the city you're applying for. And it's a good idea to apply, I would say, that's my opinion, not Hennepin County, in any place there's an opening, because you could live in a city for a while and maybe get a voucher after a period of time, and you can move where you want to live, right? And just at least check it out, have that option to have a voucher or a certificate. All right, so to apply for services, you must apply. This is not a little dove that comes from the sky and touches your cheek and says, you have this, you have to apply. Most often for housing support, which is tied to license settings and group home kinds of things, the case manager facilitates that process, helps you to facilitate that process. Not all the time, but most of the time. Sometimes the provider that you're working with will help you to facilitate that process because it's in their best interest to get paid, right? An important piece for housing support is that that provider must have a contract with the county. Ideally, they have a contract with the county before you move in, because it takes a while, sometimes a long time, to get a contract with the county, and the county might not be interested in having a contract because they might say, we have enough right now. So they must have a contract with the county for housing support. Typically, the case manager helps you through that process. Sometimes the provider will help you through the process. There is an option to apply online at minnesotabenefits.mn.gov. You complete a combined application form, and I have an example of it in one of the next slides. If you want to make a note, it's DHS 5223. What I do, my favorite friend is Google. My friend Google just puts in Minnesota Department of Human Services, eDocs or DHS 5223, and it comes up. Or you can just put in combined application form, it comes up too. So this is the very friendly form, ha ha ha. It's not very friendly, but it is a form that's consistent across the state of Minnesota. There's not going to be a box that says MSA housing assistance or housing support. You're going to look where that blue arrow is on the left, and you're going to click, you're going to put an X on SNAP benefits if you're living in your own apartment, and you're going to put an X on cash benefits also, and then you will be applying for those services. At the bottom, you want to make sure that you sign the form. Don't send it without signing the form. And this isn't the only page, there's several pages, but this is the first page so you get an idea of what it looks like. So MSA. MSA is a very underutilized program. It's about $88, but it's very underutilized. It's a monthly cash supplement for people that have Social Security or retirement survival disability benefits. You must be age 18 or blind, receiving Social Security, or you would receive Social Security, but your income is higher or over the limit, or blind or disabled. And so those are things to think of when you're applying for that. Here's an example. If you have Social Security and you have $841, you get $81 of Minnesota supplemental aid for free, and you have $922. So that helped a little bit. It didn't make you rich, but it helped a little bit to buy that extra bit of food or to get you over the edge to pay for whatever expenses you had. Some people might be eligible for additional benefits. They might need a representative payee. In addition to the $81, the state can give you $25 extra. That might need a guardian or a conservator. And so you can get $100 a month extra for that. They might need some kind of a special diet that's not paid through consumer directed community support or consumer support grant, but it's prescribed by a doctor and the amounts vary. And the big important one, you could also qualify for MSA housing assistance, and that will be about $400 more. So that's a good thing. On the combined application form, there's a little area that refers to MSA, those things we talked about, and it says, you know, does anybody in the household have the following expenses? Representative payee, guardian or conservator, medically prescribed diet, or high housing costs, you know, put a yes. On any of the boxes that apply, then you get additional funding to address that. All right, housing support, back to housing support, or the formerly group residential housing, it pays for room and board costs. In common areas will be adult foster care, board and lodging facilities, housing with services. And it pays for rent and utilities. And in some cases, in some programs, it'll pay for additional supportive services. It won't be waiver level of support, but it'll be things like helping people to prepare a meal, or helping them to make their medical appointments, or helping them to meet goals and objectives. It's not really heavy duty staffing, but it's supportive services. So these are the three common things that housing support pays for. Here's an example. In my glass of money or my glass of water, people pay their countable income, whatever that income is. If they have Social Security, it's there. If they have a job, it's there too. And then the max that the state will pay the provider per month is $954 today, this year. That changes every year, goes up a little bit, hopefully. So you contribute some, and the state contributes a less, up to the rest, up to $954.
And Jerry, is this mostly referring to a group home setting, a traditional group home setting?
This is mostly referring to a group home setting.
Okay.
However, if you are a person who is homeless that doesn't have income, you would qualify also. And so there'd be a provider out there that would have supported housing. They would have a low threshold for their application. They wouldn't say things like your income has to be 3 times the rent. They would say you don't have to have income. You can just live here, because we're trying to have a low threshold for housing. Okay. And so it typically is a group home, and the money goes to that program. Sometimes it could be for a person that's homeless. The interesting part is that if one person is homeless that moves into an apartment program, the whole building also qualifies for GRH funding. So some programs have benefited from that. So they kind of select, carefully select people that are in their program.
Very quick question on the forms from the chat. Can someone's case manager help fill out all of those forms for the person who has the disability?
Yes. Yes, they should. And keep pushing if they say no. There's all kinds of case managers out there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You have really good, great ones that are around for 30 years. You have new ones that are great, but they're just out of college and might not have ever completed a form before, and they're not as comfortable. So keep asking. ARC could help you complete the form. I could help you complete the form. Most case managers will be willing to do that. There's a financial area of the county as well. Different counties are administered differently. And so the financial case aide, the person that manages your benefits, could also help you complete the form. They're starting to meet in person. For a long time, they didn't meet in person. They're just doing it over the phone. They could advise you how to complete the form. So that shouldn't be a reason to not apply. You can always get help and assistance. So, okay, so eligibility for housing support. Again, eligible for Social Security or general assistance. And you have an income below certain limits. Generally, you're paying more than 40% of your income in rent if you were going to rent a typical place. Your asset has to also be, for Social Security, $2,000 or less, and for general assistance, it went up to $10,000 or less. So if you fall into those criteria, then you could qualify for housing support. An example of a group setting, the person has no income, say they're that homeless person we talked about before. The state of Minnesota gives you $111 to live in the program. You don't have any money, they're going to give you $111. And they're going to pay for your rent and food, the $954, go to the provider, and the provider is going to provide you meals, linens, laundry, housekeeping, laboratory supplies, and maintain the building as a result. So with that perspective, that looks pretty good. I get $111. With another perspective where I have Social Security and I might have $700 to $800, then it's like, shoot, I only get $111 at the end of the month. So there's a disincentive. Although, again, the last few years, if people are working, the formula does adapt for working. You're not going to get 100% of all the money you have for working, but you get a percentage of working, so there's less of a disincentive. It is better, or provides a better advantage to work than it does not to work, if that makes sense. Then we have a group setting. You're living with other people, and so you have Social Security. You have the income goes to the person. You get a check for Social Security every month, and then you get to keep $111 of that, and then the rest of the money goes towards the provider for rent and food. Again, you pay 3 meals a day. You get beds and linens and laundry, housekeeping, lavatory supplies, and they maintain the building and the grounds. You mow the lawn and do all those things, which they should because it's their building, right? What's countable income? Countable income is from work and benefits. It's what remains after certain deductions. Those deductions are like the personal needs allowance is one. That $111 we've talked about is a deduction. You get to always keep that. For earnings, this is kind of where we talked about if you have a job, they disregard the first $65, the $111 personal needs allowance, and half the remainder. So an example, if you earned $500, they would take $65 away. You'd get to keep $111, so you get to keep $323. $162 is countable income. So it's better than if you had Social Security and they took everything and gave you $111, you get to keep more than $111. So it's still not, I don't know, perfect, but it's better than it was. So we're always looking to improve things the way they are. There's some really good websites. This is the first of 2 websites I'm going to show you. Minnesota Disability Benefits 101.org. db101.org is really helpful. You can personalize the website. They have tools and forms and formulas in here. So you can say, okay, if I'm going to rent an apartment and it costs $1,000 a month and I've got $700 a month and I work 10 hours a week, how much money would I have? And how would that affect my benefits? And so you press the magic button and it will give you an answer, which is great. And then you plug in, well, what if I worked 15 hours or 20 hours a week? And it gives you another answer. And so it's very interactive. On the top line under Disability Benefits 101, there's some categories: work and benefits, programs, youth, and My Vault. My Vault is really helpful because you can put your links to personal financial information in there, and you can share it with a password with people that you want to share it with, your guardian, your family, your case manager. And if you didn't have access to a computer, you could go to any library or any other computer, and you can go into your vault and that information will be there. So it's a way, if you are homeless or if you don't have a computer or whatever, it'll save that information for you and you can share it with other people to get their input as well on things. You can chat. There's a chat function on the top with a little green bubble, and that goes to the disability linkage line people who are hired through the Department of Human Services, and they have access to your file, they have access to your benefit information, they can give you information. If you don't like to chat, you can call them at 866-333-2466, or you can email them and they'll give you an email back. Housing benefits. Yes.
Has this
Question?
website been around for a while, Jerry?
It has been away. It has been around, sorry, for a while. I've enjoyed it because I get to work on this, on the housing benefits. There's some staff at Department of Human Services, and they call a few of the community members over, and they say, hey, look, we've got this new tool. Can you try it out for a month with people that you work with and just give us some input? And then if it works great, then Berkeley College in California, which does a lot of these websites for many states, will add it real time while we're watching, and then you can kind of see. So there's some quality kind of checks to see if it's working really well. Nothing's perfect. If I don't read, it's not going to be helpful. If I speak Somali, Hmong, or Spanish, it might not be helpful. So we have to provide information in a number of different ways. This is one way to get information out there. maybe facilitated with a case manager, or facilitated with a friend.
Well, I find this kind of interesting because I've never once has my case manager ever talked about this, and I don't know about everybody else on Zoom here, but kind of interesting. That's why I asked if it's something kind of new.
Yeah, it's not very new. I've been around for a while, and it's been around for at least 10 years, if not more than that. But a nice part about this is when you see the partner section under the Orange of Minnesota, there's some situations, programs, places, my vault, again, glossary and partners. Partners is what the state has done trainings on housing for the past 5 years. All those trainings are saved under partners. You can click on that. You can see me for a couple of those. If you just go, I want to see more to it. You can go under there, and I did a training once a long time ago. But there's trainings on what happens if I get demitted, kicked out of my house. What happens? What happens if I get an unlawful detainer? What happens if I have a criminal background? What happens if the landlord says I need to pay 3 times? I need to have 3 times of my income must be 3 times my rent. That information has been addressed in some of those trainings, so it'd be something to just kind of pursue and check it out.
Jerry,
you might get some good information. Yeah.
My name is Justin. I'm a blind person. I'm taking notes, and so I'm muted, so you don't hear my braille machine. My other note taker is broken.
Okay.
So you're referring right now to the My Vault site, is that correct?
There's 2 sites I'm referring to. One is Housing Benefits 101. That's what we're on right now.
Right.
And the other is Disability Benefits 101. That's one we just previously talked about. Both of them have similarities, but they have different focuses.
So Housing Benefits 101 is the okay, and that's not just for people that are homeless or whatever, but for people that have been living in a home, but there's information available to assist them to ultimately move into housing independently or with a roommate or whatever.
Yep. It provides a lot of broad situations. There's one of the areas you can click on situations. It provides some examples of people looking for housing that might fit your criteria or not. In other areas, it gives you a chance to kind of experiment with your income and talk about rent, and if I worked more or less, how much money would I have, and how would it affect my benefits, my Social Security, and my other benefits.
Right. So this is housingbenefits101.org.
That's correct.
Thank you so much.
And more specifically, if you put MM for Minnesota.hb101.org, you get to the site. Once you reach the site, then it'll save it for next time. But again, Berkeley College has developed these kinds of sites for several states, not just Minnesota. So there'll be an Iowa Housing Benefits 101 and you name it. Great, thanks.
Thank you.
MSA Housing Assistance, my favorite, because I work with this the most and I'm more comfortable talking about it. So MSA Housing Assistance, you must first be eligible for MSA. We talked about that earlier, where you must be open to Social Security or eligible for Social Security if you have higher income limit, and under age 65 when applying, and have monthly costs, rent and utilities that exceed 40% of my monthly gross income. So you're paying a larger proportion of your rent, your money for rent, which isn't very hard to do. This MSA Housing Assistance is paid directly to the person, which is different than housing support. It's paid directly to the person on their electronics benefit card, just like a cash card. You go to an ATM and take money out, or it's given as a check if you have a payee. If you've been designated to have a financial payee, that MSA Housing Assistance money will come to that payee in a check. Once you receive the check or the money on your electronics benefit card, we're not asking for an audit of how you spent your money. That's your money to spend. It's intended for rent and food. Again, if you need it for something else in an emergency, you certainly could spend it on something else. Also, besides those criteria mentioned earlier, if you're relocating from a hospital, a nursing home, a regional treatment center, or an intermediate care facility for people with developmental disabilities, or intensive residential mental health treatment center, that's a lot of places, isn't it? It just kind of says if you're relocating from an institution, but you don't have to, you need one of these. You don't have to be in an institution, you just need one. If you met that criteria, you're done. That's good. Or you're eligible for PCA. You don't even have to be using PCA. You have to have an assessment and be eligible. You don't have to be using it or receiving waivered services. You do have to be receiving waivered services. But if you're eligible for PCA or receiving it, you met the criteria. It's one of these, not all of them, just one. Or transitioning from housing support. So one of those facilities that was, the provider was controlled the property, they let you live there, they provided some services. If you're leaving one of those facilities, you also qualify. Here's the fun part. This amount went up last year. And so if you had Social Security, say it's $841 for consistency, you have Minnesota supplemental aid, $81 more. MSA housing assistance is $397. It's about half of your Social Security amount. It used to be like a quarter of your amount, which is nice, but it went up. And so the reason it went up because there was a lot of advocacy to the state of Minnesota that said there aren't very many Section 8 openings or vouchers. And so people are just kind of stuck. They want to move. There was even kind of a silly form that we had to complete for a couple years that said, is the waiting list closed? All you have to do is go find it. It'll X, yeah, it's closed. So that was discontinued a couple years ago because it's pretty clear the waiting list is generally most of the time closed. So we don't have to do that. We just have to provide the county a copy of our lease and a copy of the combined application form to apply. And so the total income, instead of having $841 for rent and food, you'd have $1,319. If you had a housemate, you'd have double that, wouldn't you? You'd have $2,600. And so you could probably find a place to live. If you had somebody you got along with, not that we all want to live with somebody else, but it's just a way to look at things differently. Mm-hmm. Maybe you look at a townhouse. Maybe you look at a duplex that's upstairs, downstairs. Just a way to share those resources. If you have MSA benefits, yes. Question?
Really quickly, did you say that the CAF application does count for applying to the MSA, or the MSA housing is done separately through the housing authority? Or
are these all the funding streams we've talked about? We're not talking about Section 8. That would be the housing authority, or Section 8 vouchers housing authority. If it's MSA housing support or MSA housing assistance, thank you for following along. I know we have a word salad of things to talk about. That's all started with the combined application form. It's really easy to find if you Google it. Minnesota combined application form, it'll come up.
So if you applied for CAF, that includes food assistance. It would include.
If you check the box for SNAP, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it would include this MSA housing option? Or not?
Yes, if you met the criteria that we talked about.
Okay.
You're an adult less than 65, you're open to Social Security, you're paying a higher amount for your rent. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And it's underutilized.
Do you have to check something separate to be considered for MSA?
No.
If you do the CAF, they're looking at all options that you're mentioning.
Yep, they are. They look at where you live or where you want to live. So if you're living in a licensed setting, this wouldn't apply because you can't have MSA housing assistance in a licensed setting. If you're living in a licensed setting, then housing support would apply. But the key on the form would be to check the box that says cash and check the box that said SNAP, which is supplemental nutrition program.
Okay.
Okay. So MSA housing assistance. If you had Social Security, and you would get $81 cash from MSA and $397 from housing assistance. You'd have a total of $1,319. And that's really great. Here's a nice part about this. You have $1,300. If your rent is $900 and your food was, I don't know, $200, you get to keep the rest, put it in your pocket, use it for something else. And, you know, if you were sharing rent with somebody else and your rent was $500 and your food was $200, you got $1,300. You get to keep the rest. Maybe put it on whatever you need to do. Put it on. Buy a bike. Buy an electronic bike, and have more dependable transportation. The difference here too is that you choose where you live. They don't have places that are designated for MSA housing assistance. You go find a place to live. Answer that question. Where would you like to live? I would like to live in fill in the blank. Go live there and use MSA housing assistance. You get to go to the grocery store and shop yourself because you have that money to shop yourself. If you are living with your mom and dad and paying rent, it doesn't count. That's kind of the bummer part. You're paying rent to your mom and dad. You're an adult. You're living in the basement. They're living upstairs. Because you're at the same address as your mom and dad, it doesn't count. You have to be at a separate address. So sometimes I've asked the city, can you make the downstairs and upstairs a separate address? Some cities are willing to do that. The city of Champlin is not willing to do that. You find these things out as you kind of work with things. And so if they had a separate address, then they could get MSA. If they were an inch away from mom and dad's house and your house is right here, inch away, it counts. You can get MSA housing assistance. If they're attached, you can't. So all these little ins and outs that you gotta be aware of. Any other questions about MSA housing support, MSA housing assistance?
So yes, Jerry, so if you needed some personal care supports, is that over and above this?
Personal care would be waiver or PCA that's over and above this, yes. That's that second question. How will I pay for the staff support necessary?
Right.
Yep. Which is the nice thing. You can add all those things together and get what you need. Make a puzzle. This is like a puzzle. That's why I really enjoy working with people, because I ask those 3 questions. And they don't know all the puzzles I have in my box that I'm going to show them, you know what I mean? To get to the outcome they're looking for, which sounds kind of fun. If you have a child/adult, age 26, there's some income or some age, before age 26, there's some age criteria. You can actually save $15,000 that wouldn't affect your benefits. Balances up to $100,000 are excluded from Social Security. And this is a relatively new law called the ABLE, Achieving a Better Life Experience, ABLE accounts, which allows people who became blind or disabled before age 26 to save money for different disability-related expenses, including housing. So maybe you want to buy a house. Maybe you want to save for a down payment for a house, or whatever you need. Maybe it's school, maybe it's something else. So when you go to Disability Benefits 101, there's an area in there that describes ABLE accounts and gives you more detailed information about ABLE accounts.
Hey, Jerry, there's a question here about the one about MSA. What is considered a high amount of rent on that form?
More than 40% of your income.
Great. And then the second question is about the ABLE accounts. Does the source of the money matter for the ABLE accounts?
That's a trick question. I don't think it matters. I think, there's probably some areas where it would matter. Generally, no, it's income that you're putting away, sheltering it from medical assistance and other benefits for a period of time for a specific reason going ahead. So,
Okay.
I would contact a financial planner or an attorney for the exact answer.
Okay, there was a follow-up with that just says the Social Security of a deceased family member. Could that money be used?
probably, if it's in an inheritance or something like that. The key sometimes with trusts in an ABLE account really isn't the trust, is that the person doesn't touch the money. It goes right to the ABLE account or goes to the trust. And so it's not my money, it's a trust of Jerry Mellum's money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's in your account, then it's less likely to be able to be funded because you have access to it. The idea is that you don't have access to it, it's going to another account. So
perfect. And then there's another question in the chat here. Are ABLE accounts different from supplemental needs trusts?
yes.
How?
Well, there's many kinds of supplemental needs trusts. There's special needs trust, supplemental needs trusts. One of them, when you pass away, the money goes back to the state of Minnesota. Another one, when you pass away, you can put it in an inheritance to other people. And ABLE accounts are really specific to an age group. Not everybody can start this. You have to be a younger age, and there's some income limits. Maximum contribution annually is $15,000. Balances up to $100,000 are excluded from SSI. And so supplemental and special needs trusts don't have those income limits. That's a few differences. Again, contact your attorney for more details. There's just lots and lots and lots of these kinds of things that can help you save money that are really, really helpful. These are just a few. If you didn't know it already, this is one of many companies that will give you a free phone, text and data, unlimited texts and minutes currently, qlinkwireless.org. And the reason they do that is because you're a person who's receiving benefits. So there's a website when you go there. And if you have Section 8, you upload your Section 8 certificate to them so they can say, oh, you have Section 8, you qualify based on your income. Or you upload your EBT card or a picture of your EBT card, or you upload your medical assistance card so they know you're on MA. And so after they review those documents, they send you a phone in the mail, and you can use that phone for a whole year. And at the end of the year, there's a little prompt usually that comes on the phone that says, are you still open to these benefits? You say yes, and you continue to use the phone for another year. You can use the very inexpensive, doesn't work very well phone that they provide, or you can buy a phone or use a phone that you already have and put that service on that phone. So you have a choice to transport the service to any phone that you want to use. So that's really, really helpful. It's not listed, but there's other benefits that you could use this kind of funding for to get discounted internet at $10 a month versus having to pay $60 to $100 or more a month. I don't think you can have both a phone and internet, so you want to make a choice of having a phone or internet when you do that. The other part about these phones is that one person a household. So if you're sharing a household with 4 people, unfortunately, only one of those 4 people in that address can have a phone like this. And so if you live by yourself, great. If you have a roommate that wants a phone too, only one can have that phone. So talked about this earlier. There's lots of services through the waiver that are waivered services, but they're really other things. So we don't want to talk about food, but the waiver pays for 7 meals a week, 1 meal a day, home delivered meals, because I'm not able to prepare food. I may not be able to tell time to use an oven or a microwave. And so they deliver food and I don't have to pay for lunch once a day, 7 days a week. And I save some money that way. An amazing waiver option is called waiver caregiver living expenses. So if you have an unrelated person that you want to live with, and they're going to be your support, your natural support or your paid support, the waiver will pay their portion of the rent and their portion of food. And that's just great. So you get to live with a person, and they can actually be paid for other services like personal care attendant services or waived services, but their rent and their food is paid. So what a deal. You can tell people that, hey, I've got a great deal. I get to live for free and take care of Jerry, and he's really a fun guy to work with, and I just get paid and everything. So it's great. Minnesota Energy Assistance Grants. Every year you can apply, usually about May. You don't want to wait too long because the money might go away. So usually about May or June, you want to get that application in for the fall to apply for an energy assistance grant. It's based on your income, and you don't have to pay all of your heat bill. As an example, you get a benefit for that. How many people know of Fair for All? Just an open question. Have you heard of Fair for All before? Is it common knowledge?
Nope.
No, you guys have a lot. This is exciting. This is a big deal. So in New Hope, up Highway 169, about 69th, there's a warehouse, a food warehouse there. And that's one place you could go. Every other Monday, you can shop there and you can give them $20 and you'll get $40 worth of fresh fruits, vegetables, and meat. Or you can go on their website, Fair for All, the one that I've listed there, or Google Fair for All, that'll come up too. And there's many community centers, churches in Minnesota. And on a certain date, they have delivery pickup dates, and you can get packages of fresh meats and vegetables and fruit. Just pay $20, you get $40 worth of a product. You can get a vegetable only packet, you can get a meat only packet, you can get a holiday focus packet, maybe turkeys and Thanksgiving and those kind of things. It's just, and you can use your SNAP benefits there. So you not only get money from your SNAP benefits, you can go there and get discounted food. And so that's really a good way to save money also, and to kind of meet your needs in another way.
Wow.
How about that? We have room for questions if you have questions. Or I can go into another presentation. Want to hear about guardianship or something?
Gary, there was a question in the chat about referrals. If you have any referrals for attorneys that specialize in Social Security questions or special needs and able trusts.
Yeah, can I send that to one of you?
If you want to send it to me and I can
group?
send everything out at the end.
Okay, I'll do that.
Perfect.
Did everyone get there were a few questions that were sent out prior to this. Laura, did you send those out?
I did. Well,
Okay.
Katie did, but I have it here. I can throw it in the chat too if you'd like.
Okay. Okay.
That there's a lot of, if you look around the Twin Cities, University Avenue, the Highland development, there are so many apartment buildings being built right now. And every one of them have, city or state funding. And each of those developers do require that some of those units be set aside for, affordable units. And many of them are set aside for people with disabilities. Now, of course, it falls on each individual to go to, Ryan Companies or Common Bond or Dominium, but there are so many of these units that we never even hear about. So I would encourage people to start, when you drive by some of those developments, find out who's the developer and call those, because those units are going to go really fast.
So Rosemary, I have a question about that. So isn't there some consortium, or Jerry, isn't there some consortium that means, so from, I'm just thinking, okay, if I see Ryan Companies, well, first of all, there's no number for Ryan Companies, so that makes me have to go, onto the website, blah, blah, blah. But so there isn't because I'm assuming they get tax breaks, maybe not, I don't know. There's no one place.
There is. Minnesota Housing Finance Agency.
Yes.
Okay.
Minnesota Housing. And some parents I've worked with that are really savvy have had informational interviews or they presented their project, because many times these buildings have discounted rent for seniors, and they bring their 4 kids there and say, guess what? We have people with disabilities that need discounted rent. Also consider us in the mix when you have applications. So Minnesota Housing Finance Agency is an arm of the Department of Human Services, but they're focused on helping to create affordable housing. And I'm excited too, because I get to work with them, and I get to work with some of the projects that are building from the ground up, and they use mixed funds. They use everything they can to get a 5-story building that is income-based, going. So that's fun.
And you can go on and Minnesota Housing Finance Agency's website, and you can see all the projects that have received either low-income tax credit projects or other types of funding, and all those funds that have been awarded to those, and the number of units that are available. So it's a really great resource. And I agree with Jerry, you know, you contact Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, but you know, you kind of got to work both ways and call the developer as well, because maybe some of those units come up and they still need to fill that requirement for over a 20-year period. So it's really helpful to get
it is. Look at your neighborhoods, you know, find out what's in your neighborhood or beyond your neighborhood as well. Just keep your eyes open for those things.
So for those individuals who have needs that aren't capable of living on their own, even with a roommate, I'm assuming those units are, of course, if you rent the unit, people can't control who can come in and come out, but people can still bring their supports in.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
The magic word is accommodation. If you get a pushback, I've learned so much from the guy I volunteer with. His name is Brian. He has a brain injury and he's done really well. He has a 4th degree black belt in karate. He's got 3 e-bikes, 3 electric bikes, and he lives in Section 8. But there's been times where the office people, he has a dream catcher on his door to protect him from the office people, haven't, because they come and go, right? He's been there for 10 years and office people come and go, and then they, I don't see him doing something, they write him up, you know, whatever. And so we had to get involved and, you know, even talk to an attorney on and on. But the magic word is accommodation. So if you can work through that, get a letter of support from people, that's really going to make a big difference.
There's a question here, Jerry. If people are applying to Housing Link, and I think to probably other programs we've talked about tonight, and they're not ready to move at this moment, will they automatically go to the bottom of the waiting list?
It's hard to say. Likely. It's probably a good idea if you get a Section 8 voucher to really consider it. See if maybe it could be applied to home ownership. Certain parts of Minnesota, you can do that. Not Metro right now, but Scott County, you can do that. And so see if you can apply that to home ownership or something else. I've had people go through it twice, so they got it. So, you know, there's people out there, not everybody, but it happens where they can come up twice. Again, you're weighted higher because you have a disability in your application, and so you might come around again. It'll be a while.
Yeah.
I think the main thing to do right now is to educate yourself as much as you can. So when you get that knock on the door, you're ready to move ahead. There was a period of time in our history not so long ago where waivered services had huge, more than 1,000 people waiting list in counties. And so I would tell people, you know, I'm the guy that knocks on your door and says, hey, you got a waiver, you got the golden ticket. And they go, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Oh, you also have 60 days to decide. You know, that clock starts pretty quick. So the more you can do right now to educate yourself about the options you have and what's potentially out there, the better. So when the opportunity presents itself, you are more ready to grab it and go ahead. You guys are in a good situation through the Highland Friendship Club because you know each other, you know your parents, you know your children. And one of the first steps when you're looking for housing is to, if you're looking for a housemate, is finding the housemate, finding that roommate, because that takes the longest. After that, it's not so long, but, and the housemate is actually the parents as well as the people, if that makes sense. You have to get along with the other parent because you have to work together really, really closely for a long time. So if you can forge those relationships ahead of time, then be ready for when you want to move. I've worked with 8 parents at one time where they say, we want all of our kids to live in one house. Like, okay, well, that's not going to happen. But how about a neighborhood? You know, how about a couple condos in the neighborhood or an apartment, and you have 4 or 5 apartments in the bigger building and stuff like that, because the state looks at concentration. They have these rules when you use waiver sometimes that you can't have more than 25% of the occupants be people with disabilities, and some of them aren't very fair rules, because how am I going to tell them? Am I going to knock on everybody's door and say, hi, do you have a disability? Hello, my name's here. Do you have a disability? I'm just checking. Okay. See if I have to move out or not. But
Well, I'm just thinking there's a whole lot to digest, and Jerry, you kind of hit the surface. And so I'm encouraging our families to, because I don't think this is a one and done thing, this conversation. And so I'm inviting all of us to digest it, explore some of these websites, and perhaps we revisit this in a couple of months or something to drill down a little further, because this is it's a deep subject, and some of us have maybe a little bit of professional experience with this, but that's maybe a little. Rosemary has far more than I will ever have, but what I'm saying is that, I think I've written down some things that I'd like to look into a little more.
Yeah.
You're a wealth of information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It'd be good to get together and
Yeah.
share what people have been doing in the interim. To summarize what you're doing, what you've learned, to be resources for each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can all learn from each other,
Thank
that's for
you.
sure.
Good, thanks so much.
Their case manager, because that is part of their job, is to help figure out housing. And so you get your housing and then you get your support services, and they can work together, but you just got to keep asking questions and questions and questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's where when we get together, we all have different strengths, and we have, just different personalities. And I think that's where this is the beauty of the Highland Friendship Club, is that we bounce off one another. We've been doing that for 20 years. And so
When I have a question, when case manager is referenced, you're referring to the person that's involved in management of the waiver or reviewing the waiver.
There's different kinds of case management.
Oh yeah, well there's DRS.
Right.
There's
I'm
sure.
referring to county case manager. They might be
right. Yep.
for folks that have a developmental disability and a related condition that don't have waiver, they're required to have case manager. So that's one kind. If they have a waiver, then they're required to have a case manager too. That's another kind. So it's generally the county case manager.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, the one question is, are Housing Link and city housing authorities the same thing, or are they different?
Housing Link is a website that collects information from various housing authorities, so they're not the same. It's more of a service.
Perfect. If the caregiver retires outside of the city, and their adult child wants to live in the family home, in the city, is there a pathway to funding that if they want to stay in their family home and the caregiver?
MSA housing assistance that we talked about, MSA and MSA housing assistance. And then again, the state limits the number of people living in a house because they don't want it to look like a group home. So if you have a friend that you've been a lifelong friend with, and you both have a person-centered plan, and they both say, yes, I want to live together, that's great and fine. If you have 12 friends that want to live in a big mansion, they're probably not going to look on that as positively.
Personal experience, I do know that your house can be inherited by your child in the event that you passed away, so that they wouldn't be displaced in that moment. So that is something you can look into as well.
The trust can control the house. The parents could use it as an investment. The person could even own a house. It's more than $300,000. The thing you have to be careful of is if you have renters, so the renters aren't causing you to be over asset limit. So if you have an asset limit that's pretty stable, that'd be fine with one housemate. If you get a few, then your asset limit may be over limit. So
perfect. Those were the last questions in the chat.
all right.
What is that asset limit these days, Jerry?
I think $2,000 for Social Security was mentioned, with medical assistance there is a program called Medical Assistance for Employed Persons with Disabilities, and you can have up to $20,000 in assets if you are earning around $80 a month consistently. So if you don't have a job, then the asset limit is less for medical assistance.
You know what that is, Jerry?
It might be around $3,000, but don't quote me.
Just pop quiz for Jerry.
I know. Things change. I might have known it, but things change every year. So,
Well, Jerry, it's been a pleasure to meet you, and it's it's a deep subject. It's a sensitive, emotional, deep subject for all
is
of
for
us.
sure.
And
Patty Dunn, I'm the executive director at HFC, and I want to just recognize Pat for pulling these sessions together, because it's a lot of legwork to schedule and get speakers, and just even the concept in general, and understanding what kind of forums are helpful. So thank you, Pat, for pulling this all together.